Yep, all you.
Welcome back, everybody. This is PDPreps podcast. It's our third one of the year. Coming to you September 9th, about 11 a.m. Touching on an exciting week 2 of action. Looking ahead to some fun week 3 action. Only 2 weeks through the season so far, but what a 2 weeks it's been so far. Craziness last week. Obviously, we're going to talk about Cardinal Newman's huge upset against visiting Grant State powerhouse. Talk a bit about the St. Vincent craziness game that I was at on Saturday, pulling out a thrilling 27-21 win over American Canyon. Talk about what's shaping up, I think, to be one of the better league races too. Keenan, I know that you agree with this, but looking at the Redwood Empire Conference Valley and some of that, and how some of those teams are faring so far, and what that race could look like. But yeah, we're gonna have a lot of stuff for you coming this week. Again, lots to touch on, a lot to look forward to. But yeah, week 2, man. I mean, the season's already been, super exciting, and I know that there aren't as many marquee matchups. I think the next couple weeks, we were kind of looking ahead, but I mean, just the way that the season started out has been, I mean, as exciting as I can remember, remember any season in the last couple of years. So
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty solid games all around, I mean, obviously, first 2 weeks, you're not playing your best football. Obviously, you're still kind of working the kinks out and stuff like that. But from a viewer's perspective, excuse me, some of these games have been pretty tight. Like you just mentioned, St. Vincent American Canyon, which, I'm glad you were there. Well
mm,
worth the wait for a Saturday night game, Gus, at 7 p.m.
yeah.
But regardless, there were some good games around the area, so and yeah, preseason so far has been going pretty well, if the level of play here if this is any early indication of what preseason is gonna be like. Imagine what happens when the league play rolls around for all these tough leagues.
Yeah.
Yeah, regardless, no, pretty solid couple weeks of football, definitely exciting, and it's good to have been getting back into the swing of things for our football season.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, we obviously do still have some, what should be some very fun kind of non-league games here over the next 3 weeks, to kind of wrap things up. But, like I said, I think the next 2 weeks kind of, not as much, I guess, star power, just with some of the, the top teams hitting the road, or, schedules kind of, lightening up, I guess, a little bit here, just heading, in the next few weeks. So, not as many marquee games coming up, I think, the next 2 weeks, but still obviously some very, interesting games. Our game of the week this week will be Rancho Cotati again. They're going to be hosting a very good NCS team, and Bishop O'Dowd. You're going to be at that one. But even like locally, Annalee Petaluma, that I guess rivalry, if you want to call it, or that matchup has been provided some pretty exciting matchups, over the last few years. So I'm excited to kind of see, how that one plays out this week. But yeah, next 2 weeks, maybe not as many, huge, high powered matchups, but definitely some fun games to watch. And then I think at the first week of October, that final week of non-league play, there are going to be, definitely some bangers there too to kind of finish things out. So well, let's before we dive into kind of our takeaways from last week, we're going to touch on the North Bay football poll this week. Some interesting results this week.
I
You
love
know,
this, man. This is so much fun, honestly. This is
yeah,
great.
I mean this. Again, our 8-team pool of voters was pretty split, kind of. With some of the top teams. I mean, again, the top 3 of San Marin, Cardinal Newman, Marin Catholic are just kind of jostling for position right now. And, week in, week out, I think it's probably going to be those teams, up at the top. But some interesting results this week. So we actually have a tie this week for number
Again.
1. No, we didn't have a tie last week. We were very close to having a tie. Last week we had San Marin out. San Marin beat Marin Catholic by 1 point for
Oh, that's right. That's right.
first
That's right.
place. But both San Marin and Marin Catholic both had 4 first place votes. So there was a tie in that
That's right.
regard.
That's
But
right.
San Marin had a 1 point lead atop the polls last week. Well, now they are in a tie for first place with Cardinal Newman. Cardinal Newman and the San Marin both getting 74 points in our poll. San Marin actually got more first place votes, got 5 first place votes to Cardinal Newman's 3. But San Marin coming in here at 2-0, they beat a pretty solid team in Foothill Palisadro, last week. Had kind of a crazy comeback too. They were down, I think, a couple scores and ended up winning
Hmm.
that game 31-17. So again, solid start to the year for San Marin. But yeah, Cardinal Newman again. I was expecting honestly more first place votes for Cardinal Newman. Just after doing what they did last week, being Grant from Sacramento, who came into the game number 17 in the state, coming off of a huge win over a top 20 team in the state. Newman being, again, banged up, no quarterback, and just odds totally stacked against them, and come out with a huge win. So anyway, first place this week is going to be shared between Cardinal Newman and San Marin, each with 74 points. Marin Catholic dropping down from number 2 to number 3 this week, 62 points. Had again, their non-league schedule is brutal. We experienced that again, last week with a 28-7 loss to St. Mary's Stockton, again, a top 40 team in the state. This week again doesn't get any easier for Marin Catholic playing against Manteca, the team that beat Newman pretty bad in the opening week. So Marin Catholic schedule not easy, and I don't think their record is going to reflect how good they are, but they're probably going to take a couple more lumps, I'd say, as non-league goes on. But should be a very, very good team again once league play comes around.
Yeah.
St. Vincent coming in at number 4, rising up from number 5 last week with 55 points. Obviously, they beat number 8 American Canyon 27-21 last week. Again, crazy game, scored 20 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. Totally, like one of the craziest finishes to a game I've ever seen. Again, the North Bay's 2 defending state champions going at it. Totally, lived up to the billing and all the hype and stuff. So again, St. Vincent, keeps pushing its way and keeps making a play to become a top 3 team in the North Bay. So it should be interesting to see how the next couple weeks play out for them. Windsor actually is going to take drop a spot just with St. Vincent rising. Windsor has 53 points, so they're again right behind St. Vincent with 55. Windsor 2-0, beat Hayward 27-7 last week. Again, not the hardest non-league schedule for Windsor, but again, they're passing so far all the tests with flying colors. Rancho Cotati coming in at number 6, staying pat at number 6 with 40 points this week. Beat Redwood 27-7. Not the cleanest game for Redwood. I know that, like most teams around here, they are dealing with their injury problems right now, but, defense came up clutch, and, they were able to pull away in the second half of that win. Should be an exciting game this week against Bishop O'Dowd. Again, O'Dowd is a, pretty solid small school, NCS, I don't want to say powerhouse, but like a very solid program. So that should be a very good test for Rancho this week. Vintage staying pat at number 7 with 31 points. They took care of Fairfield 49-24 last week. Kind of same thing as Rancho. Had to pull away late. That was a bit of a closer game than I think that they had expected in the third quarter, but got a couple touchdowns late, a few stops. Won that one pretty handily. American Canyon also staying pat at number 8 with 24 points. Again, they had a 21-7 lead over St. Vincent. And looking back to last year, St. Vincent won their state title and 3 divisions higher than American Canyon. So I guess technically you could say that American Canyon was the underdogs in this game. So, again, this is also a school with almost 10 times the students that's, St. Vincent has, but obviously the St. Vincent program is, one of the better ones, even if it's a small school in the entire North Bay. No harm done for American Canyon, standing
Sure.
pat. They're at number 8 with 24 points. Number 9, Ukiah is jumping up a spot. They now have 11 points. They beat Carlmont out of Belmont from the South Bay, 55-28. Closer game, kind of again similar to Vintage and Rancho. Closer game at halftime than I think that they might have expected, but some just big, huge, explosive plays, and they were able to pull away that one late. I think they ended up winning. Fourth quarter was a running clock, so. Ukiah is now 1-1 on the year, and then Casa Grande drops from number 9 to number 10, rounds out our top 10 this week with 8 points. Pretty actually competitive game against Vacaville. I know Vacaville put up a ton of points, I think, in their season opener a couple weeks ago. But Casa only lost 20-14. I think I heard they even had the ball, were driving with a chance to either tie or take the lead in the last, the closing seconds, and Vacaville just got stopped there to end it. But it's pretty solid showing for Casa. Again, their non-league schedule is brutal. They're playing at Las Lomas this week. Las Lomas is a very good North Coast section, program, on the road too. So that'll be a tough game. And I think after this week too, I think Casa has to go play at San Marin. So.
Yep.
Tough schedule to open the year for Casa, but I think they're going to be very battle tested again by the time that league play rolls around. And then to round out our teams receiving votes, Petaluma is knocking on the door, have 6 points. Both Tamalpais and St. Helena, a little small school St. Helena coming in here with 1 point as well. So Tam and St. Helena each with 1, Petaluma with 6 points. And yeah, that is your North Bay poll top 10 this week. So Keenan, any surprises, anything that stands out about the poll this week?
I think 9 and 10 are really kind of anyone's game at this point, kind of up for grabs. I don't think there's any set, 9 and 10 teams, to really round it out. Like you kind of said, you kind of touched on it, American Canyon. I mean, obviously, they lost, so we can't move them up, but didn't hurt themselves either. Losing to two-time state champion in St. Vincent, so in nail biting fashion. Um, the one thing for me, at least from my perspective, I didn't know what really the heck to do with Cardinal Newman, right? Because we dropped him 2 spots last week to down to number 3 after losing heavy to Manteca. So I guess the question was, do we bump him back up 2 spots to number 1 because they beat Grant, or do we take, like, basically does the Grant win, right, which they were stay ranked, right? I guess the question was, does that completely outweigh the Manteca loss and the way in which they lost to Manteca? So that was kind of the age old question, and I'm sure the rest of the poll writers had that same question, including you.
Yeah, some definitely
Um,
did, just based on how people voted them. So
yeah. So it was kind of like, what do we do? And San Marin, they won. If they keep winning, I don't know why you wouldn't take him, like why you wouldn't move him down. So, um, kind of like how we had, in the past couple of years, Gus, when we went from like what top 5 to top 5 teams, top 7 teams. Well, like what do we do? We've had these age-old questions. Well, these questions are already starting, which is great, just in week 2. So, yeah. But other than that, I think everything kind of panned out like it was supposed to. Obviously, Windsor, I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. It's just like St. Vincent had that much of a marquee win. So,
yeah.
everything else kind of panned out how I expected it to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of look at these polls as week in, week out. It's almost like a power ranking, right? So it's like which team has the best win, which team is kind of trending upwards in the right direction. And I mean, again, similar to kind of how the Max Preps rankings are breaking out this year too. I mean, Cardinal Newman went all the way from number 10, I think, in the NCS after week 1 to number 3 in the NCS in the Max Preps rankings this week. So straight the schedule, I think, is a huge factor in this, or at least that's how that's how I look at it. And I mean, I had Newman number 1 in my poll. I actually had San Marin number 3 in my poll this week. I mean, again, I think Marin Catholic playing a top 40 team in St. Mary's, I'm not going to ding him that much for that loss. Even Inderkum, again, that's a very good team. And I think Inderkum and St. Mary's Stockton are both, I think, better teams than the 2 teams that San Marin's played so far. So, yeah, I obviously the loss to Manteca was, Newman did not look good in that game. Again, they were trending in the wrong direction. Quarterback gets hurt, offense looks bad, defense looks bad. It was just all bad. And then in 1 week, things kind of totally flip on their head. So, yeah, I mean, again, in my opinion, I do think that the Grant win, outweighs, the Manteca loss. And again, I mean, I had even wrote, and we'll get into more of this, here shortly. But I had said last week where I'm like, I don't know if Newman's gonna make the playoffs. Like, it could be possible. Now I'm like,
Yeah,
what a stupid
overreaction Monday
what
or
a
whatever.
stupid take that was. Now I'm like, I don't know if there's a game that they're not going to be favored in the rest of the way. So, anyway, but yeah, this is also why this poll is exciting and kind of fun, is we get all these different perspectives week in, week out. It changes. It's not just, if Keenan, you and I picking our, top 7 teams and how we think that they did. But there's a lot more, people kind of weighing in and stuff. So I think that's what makes this poll kind of fun and different and exciting.
Yeah,
So,
same.
anyway, all right, moving on. Kind of touched on that, but yeah, let's dive into that Newman Grant game. This was, again, maybe one of the more surprising wins, I'd say, in the entire state last week. I mean, again, just with the trajectories that both teams kind of entered this game. Newman coming off of a, for lack of a better word, embarrassing 40-7 loss to Manteca.
Sure.
Quarterback goes down, running clock loss at home, like all these different things. It was like, oh man, what's going on with Newman? And then they come around, and then Grant, on the other hand, coming in ranked number 17 in the state, they bounce back off of their, really kind of brutal opening loss to Folsom. They went down to Clovis and beat a very good Central or team in Central East, like pretty handily by a couple touchdowns. So two teams coming into this game off totally different weeks. Grant was ranked number 17 in the state. Newman had just dropped out of the top 50. Things were not looking good. And yeah, I mean, this was a crazy game. We obviously, wrote about it, when it happened on Friday night, but Newman's defense was unbelievable. Forced 7 turnovers of Grant, 6 interceptions. Kevon Penny had 3 interceptions alone. And he sealed the game. Again, we talk about how crazy the St. Vincent American Canyon game ended. This game probably was equal, if not more, insane and crazy. Newman is leading. Newman takes a 12-7 lead at halftime, thanks to 2 pick sixes, one of them from Cordell Strain, the other one from Jonah Bertoli. Leads 12-7 at halftime. They lead 12-7 after 3. It's a total defensive slugfest. And then in the fourth, they get about a 30-yard field goal from Devin Taylor to make it 15-7. Again, still a touchdown game. Grant gets the ball back, or kind of craziness here in the last minute, but Newman gets another interception, I think, on their very next Grant's very next play after the field goal. So they get the ball back with like 6:40 left. They have a great kind of, run the clock out drive, get a big first down conversion. But then, Grant has his timeouts, burns them. And then disaster kind of strikes for Newman. They're they're finally forced to punt just under a minute left around midfield. And the punter, there's a low snap. Punter has to go down, field the ball off of one knee, and the refs actually rule him down. So Grant gets the ball back at Newman's 42-yard line with like 45 seconds remaining. Again, unfortunately, we weren't there, but I was watching the live stream, and it was just like, oh my, just absolute pandemonium. Grant makes a pretty good effort to drive down deeper into Newman territory. A couple of costly Newman penalties get them all the way down to Newman's 10-yard line with 6 seconds left. So Grant has time for about one more play. And Kevon Penny, like we said, had 3 interceptions and gets his final one in the end zone to seal the game and give Newman, maybe one of its biggest wins in program history. I mean, I was asking some Newman folks, like maybe, when the last time Newman had a, beat an opponent, this highly ranked, and people were pointing back, maybe all the way back to again, like the early 2000s, or actually no, maybe it was the 2019 state win. It was one of the state wins that they had, where they beat some super highly ranked team out of San Diego. I think that was the 2019 game. But anyway, this is, again, one of the biggest, upset wins, one of the biggest, wins as far as ranked teams that Newman's ever had. And to do it again, coming off of what happened last week, just an absolute stunner. So shout out to Carmine Guevara. Stepping in, junior quarterback. He had some quarterback. He was the JV quarterback as a freshman 2 years ago, but has not taken any varsity quarterback reps as far as in a game up until this week. So he had a week of practice to prepare for a Grant team that, I don't know, has a dozen Division I guys, has guys on the line who are 6'5", 400 pounds, has defensive backs who are all committed. A bunch of defensive backs who are committed to going to D1 colleges, and they didn't. Newman didn't ask him to do too much, but he made he was really solid, back there. And, again, credit to him, credit to Newman's line, credit to, their playmakers. Again, no offensive touchdowns for them. And I think that will be something to watch here in the coming weeks, is just how their offense fares, again, with the backup quarterback. But, I mean, again, if they were able to, if their defense was able to do this against Grant, you just need a couple touchdowns, out of your offense. And again, Newman's stacked offensively. So I imagine that will eventually kind of come around. But, these next few weeks, that'll be something to watch too. But like I said, a lot of, I'm eating a ton of crow this week. Newman is for sure going to be a playoff team this year. Take that to the bank. I mean, again, after week 1, it was like, I don't know, maybe, but they've obviously, turned that around completely. So not only, again, do I think that they're going to be, a playoff team, but just based on this new playoff system, I think they're going to be a shoe-in for the NCS Open division. And again, if they kind of continue this trajectory, and like we said last week too, if they're going to get much better in the second half of the year when they get all their transfers eligible and they get, possibly get, LT, Redamoza back, their starting quarterback, they're going to be a much better team in the second half / latter weeks of the year. So there's a chance now, I think, that they could be a top 3 seed in the NCS Open division, which, to make it to a state game, or a state, or the state playoffs, you essentially have to be, either a 1, a 2, or a 3 seed. Essentially, I think is the best chance to do it. The 1 and the 2 seeds, are playing the Open division. I think 3, 6, whatever, 4, 5 are in Division 1. So less games to play if you make the 1 or the 2 seed. But yeah, I mean, that I know is what Newman is probably shooting for, is being one of those top 3 again. I know that they'd love to be a top 2 seed, but and again, a lot of season left to play. But just after last week, I'm back to being super high on the Cardinals. So yeah, we'll see. But just probably one of the definitely I'd say the biggest winner in Northern California, this week was Cardinal Newman. So.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, that I mean, just following that game was absolutely nuts. Obviously, I was over in Santa Rosa, watching Santa Rosa and Petaluma, but yeah, that was insane. I just think it's you kind of mentioned it a couple times now, but I think it's hilarious how you just flip the switch and turn the tables on your on your
Week in, week
actions
out, man.
there.
I mean,
Uh,
first 2 weeks
I
of the
know it's
season,
good.
it's just like there's so much stuff that can happen. So
Yeah, I mean, shout out Newman, man. I think last just on Friday night they turned into the team we know they can be, and they can even be even better. Obviously, like you said, with their offense and stuff, and their offensive firepower that they have yet to really unleash. Maybe that comes against Armijo this Friday night. Who knows? But yeah, Newman's got, definitely trending in the right direction, has got a couple of games now where, we could see them continue to trend in that right direction before league play runs around, but or comes around. But yeah, what a performance. That was crazy. And another thing about it, I was kind of I'm kind of skeptical on Grant just because, and I know you were watching it too, just seeing how they performed against Folsom on ESPN at home, too, was not the greatest representation,
Mhm.
by them, obviously, uh, I don't want to say like undisciplined because I think that may be the wrong word, but obviously, lots of costly penalties, things like that. So, we kind of knew this team in Grant was, a little bit not shaky, but was definitely beatable, despite all the talent they had, and Newman just gave it to him defensively. So, shout out to Cardinal Newman, fantastic win, and yeah, hopefully they continue upwards.
Yeah, and I will say, and not to take anything away from Cardinal Newman's win here, but this Grant team is also very similar to Newman in the fact that they have a bunch of transfers too who are not eligible. So they're also going to be a much better team in the second half of the year. I know they have a very
Yeah,
talented quarterback who is waiting in the wings to be, to again after a sit out period, he'll be able to play in the second half of the year. And they have a number of also, again, like Newman, a number of very talented transfers coming in too. So this is not the final product of Grant. Now, again, this is still a Grant team that was ranked number 17 in the state that, is coming off of a, Division II AA state championship last year. They've won 2 state titles in the last 3 years. One of the premier programs, if not all of Northern California, for sure in Sacramento. So, but still, I mean, this is also a team that put up 42 points and the quarterback passed for a boatload of yards and touchdowns, in the week prior against a state ranked team. So definitely a hot and cold team and maybe one of the more inconsistent teams in the top, state rankings, but
that's probably
still,
the right
this
way
is,
forward. Inconsistent,
yeah,
yeah.
but still a monumental win again, just like we said, considering what had happened the week prior and just, the odds facing, that Newman faced, I think, coming into this game. So, yeah, just a really interesting game. Again, a great win for Newman. And yeah, just a hell of a way to cap off kind of week 2 of, after there have been a lot of questions after week 1. So, Well, so quickly moving on here, a couple more things we're going to touch on. But obviously, we've touched on the St. Vincent game, but we're going to go into a little more depth about that one. But I
More
think
adrenaline.
for years, I think, or the last couple of years for sure, especially after last year, there's been a lot of people, especially in Sonoma County and the North Bay, kind of clamoring for St. Vincent. It's like, hey, you guys are a very good Division 7 team, but maybe schedule some harder opponents, schedule some bigger schools. And I think prior again to this to this new playoff system being put in place, it kind of made sense why the big schools didn't want to schedule St. Vincent. It's kind of a lose-lose situation for a lot of them.
Sure.
Either you lose to a Division 7 team and that's, a bad look for you, or you beat a Division 7 team, which everyone thinks that, that you should do. But now with this new computer ranking system, it doesn't matter how big you are. All that matters is your rankings. And St. Vincent has, closed out last year, I think, being a top 10 in the NCS rankings, computer rankings. And this year, again, they opened the year at number 12 overall. So Division 7 or not, they're still a top 15 team in the NCS. So yeah, that has also opened the door up for, bigger schools to want to schedule them. And we've seen, and we
Mhm.
saw that, this week, and we'll see that, kind of later on this season, when they play Rancho Cotati, which I'm very excited for. That should be another very fun game. But yeah, St. Vincent goes on the road at to American Canyon, which, as you know, Keenan, you covered them a bunch, up there last year. Tough place to play. 7 o'clock
Okay.
kickoff time Saturday night. I got stuck in traffic on Highway 37 getting out there. So yeah, I mean, tough place to play. Not to mention too, St. Vincent had a slew of injuries last week. They had a crazy 43-41 last second win over Woodland Christian. They a bunch of their starters got hurt. So they dressed 20, I think it was 19 or 20 players this week. So less than basically like I think American Canyon.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, American Canyon, I think, had, I don't know, 40, 50 guys dressed, in St. Vincent at 19, 20. All these guys had to go both ways. There were guys getting banged up. New guys had to come in. I even heard that there was a wide receiver who had to get, who had to fill in and learn how to play right tackle this week because they were so banged up on the line. And again, this was also a bizarre game to start. I mean, both of these, last week I'm expecting points like St. Vincent, American Canyon, if they can both fill it up, this will be a track meet.
Yep.
And first half, it was not at all that. There was a bunch of St. Vincent turned the ball over on their first two possessions. First play of the game, Gabe Casanovas throws a little out route or something. Evan Paris steps up, snags it, takes it back for a 45-yard pick six. So off the bat, American Canyon takes a 6-0 lead 15 seconds into the game. And then on St. Vincent's, ensuing kickoff return, they fumble the ball right back to American Canyon. So it's just like a disaster start for St. Vincent. They're able to kind of come back, get a nice drive going, take a 7-6 lead. But that was where the score stood after halftime. It was just kind of a bizarre start. 7-6, a bunch of turnovers. Neither offense had really been able to get going. St. Vincent even had they had a touchdown called back due to a holding, had to settle for a field goal, missed the field goal. They went for a fake punt within their own territory in the last minute of the first half, didn't get it. American Canyon has a chance to add a score before halftime. American Canyon fumbles it back over to St. Vincent. So it's just like all this madness had happened. I think in the first two quarters, and it was just like, I don't know what to make of this game. American Canyon then comes out, finds its offense, their legendary kind of, explosive plays offense. And, they're able to rip off two scoring drives in the third quarter, make it 21-7 heading to the fourth. St. Vincent actually has a good, opening drive in the fourth. And then, they get deep into American Canyon territory and then fumble it again. So I think that was their third turnover of the night. And, I know that there were some, people who had made the trip out to Napa and were like, this is over. Like, and honestly, there were, me and a few other reporters on the sideline were like, this is just not St. Vincent's night. Like, we've seen them play really
Mhm.
well, but it's just like, weren't getting any breaks. Just turnovers were killing them. Couldn't get a stop on defense. They're banged up, super, like out, shorthanded, all these different things. And, all of a sudden, in the last 7 minutes of the game, something absolutely flips. Honestly, it all started though. St. Vincent or American Canyon had what looked to be essentially, the game-sealing touchdown. Isaac Anderson broke free, had a 62-yard, touchdown run. I think with like 8 or 9 minutes left, that would have put them up, 3 scores. But the touchdown was called back due to a holding. Again, I think if that play had stood, I think the game's over. But
Mm-hmm.
St. Vincent gets the ball back with about 7 minutes left. They, score a touchdown to make it 21-13. They actually, I think they have the PAT blocked, so it's still a, touchdown and a 2-point game. Then on American Canyon's very next possession, their drive kind of stalls out. They have to punt. The punt, this is again where the breaks kind of start going St. Vincent's way. The punt gets deflected off of an American Canyon blocker, and St. Vincent actually brings it back. So it was about a 5-yard net loss on the play. 3 plays later, St. Vincent scores again. So now it's 21-19. They go for 2. American Canyon snuffs it out. So it's 21-19 with about 2 minutes left. And now it's like, okay, onside kick's coming here. Perfectly executed onside kick. St. Vincent recovers it. Jack Ellis is just in the right place, right time. Honestly, it was like there was no American Canyon guys around him. It was a perfectly placed kick. Jack Ellis, was in the perfect position. Got the ball back, and now it's under 3 minutes left, and St. Vincent is threatening again. And Jack Ellis, is the hero again too. He catches a great little pass in the flat, breaks about 2 or 3 tackles, and fights his way in for an 18-yard touchdown. So or St. Vincent also goes for 2, and from again 21-7 with 7 minutes left. Now they lead 27-21 with about 45 seconds left. So just one of the craziest flipping on its head games that I'd ever seen. But also the game isn't over at that point too. American Canyon now back against the wall. They got to find something. They get a nice little drive. They get a good return on the kickoff. They get all the way down to St. Vincent's 37-yard line. And then a tip pass with Cameron Hunter, looking in the middle for a receiver. Ball gets tipped, and Brody Breen makes an amazing diving catch for the interception and to seal the game with 6 seconds left. So again, one of the craziest games I've ever witnessed, that I've ever covered, that I've ever, been a part of. Even the players in St. Vincent, I asked all of them after the game, I'm like, where does this one rank as far as like crazy games that you've been a part of? And this is a team that's won 2 state championships.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 years, a lot of these guys were members of both of those teams, and all of them were like, this is like a top 3, top 4 game that they've ever been a part of, which I think speaks a lot to, how crazy that this game was. So, but yeah, bigger picture here too. This is St. Vincent, playing against a bigger school, playing it shorthanded, no less, and coming out with a pretty big statement win here. So, I know the SV guys were, throwing out, heart of a champion, a lot, after the game, and it's true. This is a win for a team that, knows how to win, that knows how to, dig deep and, find something, when their backs are up against the wall. So, huge statement win for St. Vincent. Hopefully that they, they can get a bit healthy, here in the next couple of weeks, because again, they're super shorthanded right now. But, just with, kind of like Newman against Grant, odds against them, and St. Vincent, rises to the challenge. But, again, I think this is more evidence too that, and I wrote about this last year after they beat Houston, in the NorCal Bowl game, St. Vincent shouldn't be regarded as just a good small school program anymore. This is a good program, period. Regardless if they are Division 7, only have 25 guys on their roster. I think there's maybe only a couple teams in the area that they might be overmatched against, but I think that their talent speaks for itself. Regardless of how big they are. So, again, looking ahead, I'm very excited to see how the Rancho Cotati game plays out on October 4th, because same thing. This is a team. Rancho Cotati has been a historical North Bay powerhouse. One of the top teams in Sonoma County for the last 20 years. St. Vincent is just a small school on the rise right now, and they're really going to see what they're made of, here in a couple of weeks. But it's just a really awesome game, really great win for St. Vincent. Again, just props also to American Canyon for showing a lot of fight, to have St. Vincent in that position, right? This is, like I said earlier, American Canyon won its state title last year 3 divisions lower than St. Vincent. I think they were 5A, or something like that. 5A, and then St. Vincent, I think, was 4AA. So there's multiple divisions kind of, between them and St. Vincent. So technically, I guess American Canyon was the underdog in this, but, to push St. Vincent like they did, I think it also shows a lot about what American Canyon can be this year too. So I'm excited to kind of see, how the rest of their season goes, because, and we're going to transition to this here in a second, but I think that they're definitely going to be probably the team to beat, I'd say, in the REC Valley coming up here in a couple of weeks. So, Yeah, just again, hell of a game. Really impressed by both teams, and yeah, just it should be race season for both of them again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and I've been writing about this about St. Vincent like pretty much for this entire year. This is probably the most experienced senior class in like in the entire NCS. On the back of two straight state championships, and you kind of like you said, you alluded to that they know how to win, and they've been in these kind of situations before, and they face adversity ever since they lost to Clear Lake in that NCS title game a couple years back, where they didn't
Right.
face adversity at all that entire season. Ever since then, they've just been an adversity machine. They've been able to match adversity week in and week out when they need to. So this is just a seasoned, experienced, St. Vincent team, and they were able to get the job done. And you kind of mentioned the props American Canyon. Last year, American Canyon state title run was kind of on the back of like a not like a Cinderella postseason run, I would say, but more of like a magical postseason run for sure. This performance for me for American Canyon, American Canyon is legit. Let's just put it out there. I think they're legit. They
They're
they
very good.
bring they bring they brought so many people back, and they only lost a couple like high impact players. I mean, they were obviously very high impact players like Mason Harris and stuff like that, but they bring a lot of dudes back, and first year head coach Marcellus Holmes, he seems to have those guys, picking up right where they left off after the state championship win. Although this is no bad loss by any means, but
Mm.
this is American Canyon, really showing that when they need to rise, against a very solid opponent, they'll do so. And I think experience was the biggest factor in this one, and the late game experience that St. Vincent has, and that was the big difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we mentioned, the Newman being an NCS Open Division team and everything this year, but and we talked about this, I think a little bit. I think I forget if that was in the West Coast Prep Spaces on Friday or maybe in our last pod or something. But St. Vincent, currently they sit at number 12 in the NCS, which I was a bit surprised that they didn't move up at all after that win over American Canyon. But again, just looking at the rest of their non-league schedule, they're playing Lowell this week, who I think that they should roll pretty well. I think the week after that they play up at Arcata, who is also a defending state champion, and then the week after that they play Rancho Cotati, who I think at this point is a top 20 team in the NCS. So. And then once they get to
Pretty
league
sure they
play,
have a bye in between Lowell and Arcata too,
yeah,
so
yeah,
so
yeah,
they
they
could get
might.
rested up.
So yeah, buy at some point in there. But looking at the teams that are ahead of St. Vincent right now. So El Cerrito is number 9. They're going to be playoff ineligible this year just because of the NCS violations they had last year. Liberty is number 10, Campolindo is number 11, and St. Vincent's number 12. So really, St. Vincent only has, I guess, 3-4 teams to jump. To be an NCS Open
Oh boy,
Division team.
Gus.
I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, again, they also San Marin's also there at number 8. California, big Division 1 schools there at number 7. Cal plays a brutal schedule. San Marin has obviously some very tough games, playing in the RC Adobe. But St. Vincent is 4 spots away from being an Open Division team again. This is week 2. A lot, there's still a lot to play out, but the possibilities there. Some teams have a drop off, don't play super well, have injuries. There is a path that St. Vincent could sneak into the Open Division, which I don't think that they would want, just because they would probably be an 8 or a 7 seed and have to play at De La Salle or at Pittsburgh. And I don't think that they're not. I mean, again, they're
If
on
it
the rise
happens,
here.
we're traveling down there, Gus. I don't
I
care. I
know
don't
they're
care.
on the rise here in the North Bay, but that's just an upper echelon of competition that they're just not.
Yeah.
I think their coaches will even admit they're not there yet. But still, I mean, again, if they're not in the Open Division, which again I don't think that they will be, they're going to be a Division 5 team and probably clean up that section again and have a very good chance to win a 3rd state title in a row. So.
But
And then
but that would make it interesting then for the if they win the section where they would go in the CIF, right? Because they were
100%.
Division 6 2 years ago, now Division 4 last year, and who knows.
Yep,
Um,
they could very well be a Division 3. I mean, I don't think that they'd go all the way up to Division 2, but yeah, I mean, the CIF seeding procedure for the state playoff is a little it's a little mysterious. It's all kind of behind the scenes. They have a whole, seating committee, and it's not as kind of clear cut as the section playoffs are. But yeah, I mean, I could very well again see if St. Vincent makes a NorCal game again, that they'd for sure be in a higher division than they were last year, which is 4AA. So
But
makes it feasible to dump
that's
into Division
looking
3.
further down the
Yeah,
road.
way down the road, way down the road. Again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But anyway, it's just it's for sure a storyline that I will be paying attention to, and I think it's a storyline that's that a lot of people up here in the road they will be paying attention to. So
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's kind of take our last point here, Gus. We kind of touched, you kind of mentioned it briefly earlier on in the episode here, but we're kind of, and this could be a bit of an overreaction, right? Because we're only 2 weeks in, obviously, but kind of already looking at the way some of these teams shape up, and the leagues that they're in and stuff. We are obviously know the Adobe is going to be a bloodbath and everything like that, and those teams look pretty good, but I was kind of looking at some of these teams and the way they've been playing, and the REC Valley might be a very, very tight league race this year based on the early indications over the last 2 weeks. Obviously, Casa Grande, defending champion, they're now 0-2. They definitely have had the hardest schedule out of any of the Valley teams so far, for sure. But regardless, they're 0-2. American Canyon, we obviously just touched on them. Gus, you said they could be a potential, title favorite down there in the Valley. Petaluma, they've played Montgomery, Santa Rosa. They've run over 400 yards rushing in both. So they look pretty good. They have some things to clean up. Heck, and even Napa, Napa, a team that went winless last year, gave Annalie Fitz for like a half, you know. So
I don't know if I
everyone's
I don't
getting.
know if I yeah I don't know if
Uh,
I'd go as far to throw Napa in the mix there, but the team that also I'd
no,
be
no, no, no,
interested.
no. I just wanted to give Napa their flowers because I know
Oh yeah.
they went winless in league last year. But
Well, the other team the other team I was going to mention in that mix too that you didn't talk about was Redwood. Obviously Redwood
yep.
was the team that made the NCS Division 4 title game last year, and beat American Canyon to like a couple weeks prior, and then American Canyon beat them for that for that NCS title. But we also have an NCS Division 4 runner up too, in that league,
Yeah,
and I know that they haven't had the best of starts to the year. I mean, their opening game, they lost 7-2. I think that was to who was that? To San Leandro, I want to say. Hold on, bear with me. Yeah, they had a bad opening loss to San Leandro 7-2. And then again, Rancho pulled away late, but Redwood was in that game, I think, for a bit. So yeah, Redwood also could definitely, I feel like, be in that mix as well.
well, just to give some context, Redwood's only touchdown was on a special teams play, so Rancho's defense pitched basically a shutout. And that play in question was when the punter tried to throw a ball and threw pick six. So,
There you go.
um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the three favorites right now, personally, are going to be Petaluma, Casa, and American Canyon. Um, if I had to bet the house on three teams to potentially win it, American Canyon could be the favorites. Obviously, there's that psychological battle of never being able to beat Casa Grande, right? Or haven't been able to in the past couple of years. We thought last year they were going to do a lot better than they did, and Casa Grande, gave it to them over at American Canyon. Petaluma, obviously, last year, bit of a tough season for them, but now they have a bunch of seniors on that team, and they have some things to clean up. But when they're humming, they're humming. Um, and obviously, it's way too early to obviously predict or try to predict league races. But and both teams have a couple more games obviously before league play really begins. But the Valley could be just as big of a bloodbath as the Adobe. In terms of league play, when things come around, and this is a league race that could very well come down to the last game of the season. Which I think is like, I'm pretty sure the Egg Bowl's last game of the season and stuff like that. So could be could very well come down to the last game.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I think if you look back at how the REC the four divisions played out last year, I think basically every league race came down to either the last or the second to last week of the season. I think in all four of them. I mean, obviously Sonoma Valley ran away with the Mountain last year. St. Vincent, ran away with the Bay. Casa, took advantage of those couple late losses from American Canyon, to win that league. But the Adobe came down, to that final game, Marin Catholic Cardinal Newman last year. So, yeah, I mean, again, with this new realignment, I think all these leagues are definitely much more even and much more balanced. You know, I don't know if the valley is maybe as deep as like the Adobe is, or maybe as balanced. Yeah, I think the Adobe might be the most balanced across the board this year. It's going to be a total, like you said, bloodbath. There's war of attrition. I think in that league more than any others. But I think the valley for sure, I think is maybe one of the biggest question marks. Maybe the valley and the mountain of like, there could be three teams here that had three, maybe even four teams that have a shot to win the or to win the league title in this. So, I'd
Yeah.
still say St. Vincent, I'd say is the favorite over in the Bay, with Ukiah again, being a close second, being their biggest competition. I think the mountain I think just might be wide open this year. Sonoma Valley had a good win over Montgomery, last week, but Piner's a bit down this year. I'm trying to I don't really know. Healdsburg unfortunately had to cancel their game this week against Santa Rosa just due to a lack of players. I think that they'll be better in the second half, but Marin teams are all still a bit of a question mark down there too. So yeah, I mean the Valley I think for sure could be one of the more exciting races that we have. Just with there could be a number of teams that kind of rise above, and it all depends on injuries and how you play towards the end of the year and stuff. And yeah, that's always a question mark with every team. But yeah, I think that the REC Valley could be probably the best race that we have, I'd say, in the area this year. So it should be fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, that's kind of what we have for us. You know, this week I think obviously our game of the week is going to be Rancho Cotati versus Bishop O'Dowd. We'll also have coverage from Petaluma Annalee in Petaluma, and then I think we'll also have coverage coming from Maria Carrillo as they take on Redwood, I believe. So, I mean, just because Gus said, that there weren't any really marquee matchups this week, doesn't mean we're not going to be covering games. So we'll still be out there, obviously. Um, and yeah, we appreciate you guys for watching. Gus, anything else before we sign off for the week?
So we got, yeah, again, it's a pretty fun couple weeks here. Week 3 should be, exciting again. Maybe not as many, upper echelon games, but week in, week out, we people already had a ton of surprises and upsets and great, crazy things to watch. And this week should be no different, even if there aren't any, high powered matchups that we're watching around the area. And so, as always, stay tuned. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. And we'll be back with more stuff for you guys next week. So.
Thanks, guys.